sole survivor, the woman who fell to earth. In 1971, Julianne Kopchi survived a plane crash in the Peruvian jungle. Only now can she bear to tell the full story in her memoir, When I Fell from the Sky. Julianne Kopchi revisited the crash site from 1998 for Werner Herzog's documentary Wings of Hope. On Christmas Eve 1971, half an hour after takeoff from Lima Airport, Peru, a passenger plane bound for Pucallpa in the Amazon rainforest flew into a thunderstorm. The plane started lurching and bumping in the air. Then, in a single catastrophic moment, a bolt of lightning hit one of the fuel tanks and tore the wing off. LANSA Flight 508 went into a nosedive, and all 92 of its passengers and crew were killed, except for one. 1 minute after Julianne Kopchi was 17, was sitting in the window seat next to her mother. The next, she was falling through the air, still strapped to her seat, and her mother had vanished. The filmmaker, Werner Herzog, who some 30 years later, was to make a documentary about Kopchi's extraordinary survival, said, "She did not leave the airplane left her." Kopchi remembers falling head first with a seatbelt digging into her stomach and a canopy of trees spiraling towards her. Then she lost consciousness. She came to the next morning on the floor of the rainforest. She had somehow managed to drop 2 miles through the air and not only survive but walk away with apparently nothing more than concussion, a broken collarbone, a gash on her leg, and a small cut on her arm. But falling from the sky was only the beginning of her troubles. The forest that saved her life became her prison. She was now lost in deep, uninhabited jungle with danger behind every bush. Please pause this recording and make a prediction. What is going to happen? Use some clues. There were jaguars, scorpions, and poisonous snakes camouflaged as leaves, which she couldn't see because she had lost her glasses. Equally unsettling were the rivers, the piranhas, and alligators. And December in the rainforest is wet. By day, Kopchi was dotted with the black outlines of hundreds of bugs. By night, she was lashed with the ice-cold rain. Kopchi didn't have any other tools for survival, such as a machete or plastic boots. She was just a girl in a thin cotton mini dress with a broken zip and one white sandal. The other was lost in the crash, and she decided that one was better than none. With nothing to sustain her but a bag of boiled sweets, which ran out on day 4, and a simple belief that she had to keep going. But 10 days after the plane crashed on January 3rd, 1972, Kopchi was found by 3 forest workers. Her story gripped the world. There was something powerfully life-affirming in the cocktail of luck, bravery, and the invincibility of human spirit. The same month, the first interview appeared in her native country, Germany, in Stern magazine. The media coverage exploded. One journalist was so desperate to get an interview that she pretended to be a nurse. Kopchi was being talked about and written about all over the globe. At first, she obliged, even collaborating with the makers of the 1974 film Miracles Still Happen, in which Susan Penhaligon starred as Julianne. But after a year or so, the attention overwhelmed her. "I thought it's like dogs hunting me," she told me. She brushed journalists away and effectively disappeared for 4 decades, until now. When I Fell from the Sky, her memoir of the crash was published in Germany last year and will be released in Britain in March. Growing up. In 1968, her parents decided to move to Lima in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, where they set up Pangunana, a research station on stilts named after a native bird. Aged 14, Kopje became a jungle child. So stop and write a question. What could you ask her about living in the middle of the rainforest? Pause if you need to. Outside was a tangle of vines and trees, birds and howler monkeys. Inside were her parents' books, no running water, and the routine of shaking out rubber boots every morning to remove poisonous spiders. For her parents, it was heaven on earth, and she grew to love it too. Kopje lived there for 18 months, homeschooled by her parents. I had a very strict program. My father taught me math, and then every morning I went with my parents into the forest. This is when she learned the lessons that would save her life. Always pick your feet up from the ground to avoid tripping over a root. If you've lost your way, follow a flow of water and you'll find your way out. But the educational authorities didn't approve, and in March 1970, Kopje returned to the German-Peruvian Alexander von Humboldt School in Lima to take her exams. She passed, and on December 23, 1971, she graduated. Kopje had spent quite a bit of the past 4 decades going over just why she was so adamant about going to the ceremony to collect her diploma, but she can't make the outcome any different. Her mother, who was working in Lima, wanted to fly back to Panguana on December 19th or 20th. But on December 22nd, we had a very important event for a teenager, the graduation ball. For weeks, she saved up the money to buy her first long dress. Blue, puffy-sleeved, a little bit low-cut. This was her big chance to wear it. I begged my mother. Of course, she understood. They agreed to fly home on Christmas Eve, but all the flights were fully booked, except for one with the airline LANSA. Her mother booked 2 seats on the plane. In moments of guilt, Kopje returned to the memory of her mother saying, "I think it will be okay." LANSA had a very bad reputation, she explains. My father had said to my mother, "Please don't fly with LANSA, any other airline but LANSA." Its reputation was based on the type of planes in LANSA's fleet. The L-180 Electra, an American turboprop built by Lockheed, had problems since its launch in 1957. Over the next 50 years, 58 out of 170 Electras would be written off because of crashes and other accidents. The year before the doomed Flight 508, LANSA Flight 502 had crashed shortly after takeoff from Cuzco, killing 99 of the 100 people on board. At 11 a.m. on December 24th, their flight was called, and Kopje sat 2 rows from the back next to the window. Her mother was in a middle seat and a heavy-set man in the aisle. We were only 15 minutes from landing, Kopje recalls, and suddenly it went very dark as we entered the storm. The turbulence was terrible. Parcels, jackets, bags flew from the overhead lockers. Christmas cakes and gifts. People began to cry in panic. Then I saw a blinding white light over the right wing. It is in that instinct her mother knew what was in store. She said calmly, "Now it's all over." The plane made a nosedive, and I could see the cockpit, and there was terrible crying from the people and very deep roaring of the engines, not a normal sound, much louder. And then suddenly it was over. The noise was gone. I was outside of the plane. It was completely silent. Stop and make an inference. What do you think actually happened? Make sure you highlight clue words. The graduation ceremony, the night before the crash. Kopje had often wondered why she didn't drop like a stone through the sky like the others. In the jungle after the crash, she found the remains of a bank of 3 seats, like the one that her and her mother were sitting in. Although this one was rammed head first about 3 feet into the soil. The heads of the passengers, 2 men and a woman, were stuck there in the rainforest. She has 4 theories about how she survived in the fall. First, that the power up drop from the thunderstorm slowed her plunge. Secondly, that the 3-seat bench worked like the wing of a maple seed spinning as it fell. This is Herzog's explanation. Thirdly, that the trees where she fell were particularly dense and knitted together. And lastly, that she hit the trees with the seat below her, and fell through the branches, as in a boat, to land relatively gently on the rainforest floor. So this was luck, and more luck was to follow. Kopje had landed about 30 miles from Panguana, and she attuned to the forest here. The animals, bugs, and general feel. I felt no fear because it were the same environment I knew from home, she says. She knew instantly that it was important to get out to find help because this was an uninhabited area. She found a stream, as her father told her, in the belief that it would lead to a larger river and some people. So how did she survive? Stop and figure that out. She knew that piranhas are only dangerous in shallow water, so she floated midstream. She knew that much of what grew was poisonous, but the water from the creek was safe. There wasn't much danger of dysentery in the uninhibited forest, and she knew exactly what to do when she heard the call of hoatzins, because didn't her mother tell her about those birds? You only find hoatzins near large rivers, open water, she says. But the sound was not coming from where she was headed, so she left her creek, which felt wildly counterintuitive, and followed the bird call through dense thickets until she came out into the open and saw the river. I was very proud of myself. She was lucky not to step on a stingray or get attacked by an alligator or to catch the poison arrow frog she was so desperate to eat. The poison is normally too weak to kill, but in her state it could have been fatal. What's more, the men who found her only visited their logging camp very rarely. It was pure chance that they came that day. Do you feel lucky? I ask. Sometimes I feel unlucky that I have to carry this heavy weight because it's a heavy weight for the psyche, she replies. It's always there, like a visitor that entered my life, and although I reject him, he is there. I cannot push him away, but I am healthy and I can do work that I love, and this is only possible because I survived. So I am lucky too. Julianne Kopje returned to Panguana in 1981 to study bats for her PhD. Her father's suggestion. Panguana had an abundance of vampire bats. One even bit her big toe while she was sleeping as a child. She spent 18 months in her old home and identified 52 bat species. But it was ultimately the trip back to the crash site with Herzog that prompted her to take responsibility for her parents' legacy. It became clear to me that the time had come for me to assume responsibility for the research station and the inhabitants. She is still devoted to Panguana, which is poised to become a nature reserve. She has explained its size from 460 to 1,730 acres and is due to sign the papers to make the conservation plans legal next month. I'm now trying to save the rainforest that saved my life, she said. She and Erich visit twice a year, which, of course, means flying. Long flights are difficult, she admits. I get so tense that even sleeping pills don't work. Then she adds engagingly, red wine is always good, and whiskey. But she still worries that she's not doing enough.